Hi, friends. Welcome to Sybil's Lab of Cartomantics. I'm Amelia.
I'm Danielle.
And this week we are talking all about enemies to lovers with our tarot decks. So, Danielle, explain it a little bit further.
I always get to explain these videos where I think like the title does the heavy lifting, but here's what we're doing. We're talking about decks that we started out with a pretty hostile or tense relationship with. In some way, we had resistance. We thought it was all over. There was never going to be a fit, but somehow things have come around. We have journeyed. We have fallen in love. We have somehow worked into some kind of close relationship. So we will be focusing on one deck for the length of the conversation with 5 questions, as we like to do on Sybil's Gap. But we gave ourselves permission to have a runner up. So we're going to be sharing first a deck that also is a kind of enemies to lovers experience, but is maybe less dramatic story than the one that we'll be talking about for the full video. So Amelia, tell us, what is your runner-up enemies to lovers deck?
All right, my runner-up is the traditional Thoth Tarot. I think a lot of people have a bit of an antagonistic relationship with this deck when they first work with it, unless you're special. I find that special people are able to just pick this up and work with it immediately. But a lot of us, for the vast majority of us, we tend to have a bit of a harrowed relationship with this. Like, long story short with this one, I felt like it was kind of out of my wheelhouse. It was a little bit beyond what I was personally capable of doing with tarot. And it was actually through our book club that Danielle and I are part of. She forced us several years ago to work with the Tabula Mundi. And that is a deck that is based on the Golden Dawn system. And it was through that and really understanding that system through Mel Moline, or MM Moline is the creator of the Tabula Mundi. And the way she just makes it so digestible, I was like, oh, maybe there's something here with this like Thoth stuff. And that got me kind of on a rabbit hole, and eventually really fell in love with this deck and came to appreciate it as, like, I think a lot of people, and myself included, actually, I'll just speak for myself. I felt like this was really high-minded, and it was just a little bit beyond what I want to do or even can do with tarot at this point in my life, and certainly at that point in my life. And I found this to be, through work and study with it, and through that work that we did with the Tabula Mundi, I found it to be so down to earth and grounded, and really more about like a rooted kind of spiritual existence, which I thought was really, really beautiful. But yeah, this is my runner-up. This is not the decks that I
Yours
picked.
is trimmed. Why did you trim it? Was that in some way your way of coming around to the art, or?
You know, I don't know why I trimmed it. So for the longest time, all I had was there are like many different editions of this deck in print, or that have been printed. And I had a smaller edition that was printed. And I knew for a long time that I wanted the larger. This is the larger size. So like with all of the borders around, it's about the size of my hand. And I think really and truly it was a practical decision. Like, the borders kind of felt like they got in the way when I was laying out multiple cards on a table. They're huge, so they took up a lot of space, but I wanted the bigger art. And so I just trimmed off I kept the bottom border, but I trimmed off the 3 other borders so that I could just see the cards more clearly, and not have to deal with the extra, like, I mean, it adds like an inch because they're big old borders too. They're not small.
The art, I don't know about you, but when I trimmed my Thoth as a part of my like coming around to it, it was just like letting the art do the work and lifting off the stressful stuff, like the border with all of the esoteric information, whatever. I can do art, just me and some art, and then coming back to it. I love it. I love it.
All right,
And
what's your runner-up?
my runner-up is the Tarot of Curiosities. This is larger than a traditional tarot deck, but this deck has some triggering images. So here we go. And I've shared these images before. Yeah. So I think what are the suits? Keys, potions, needles, and locks. for wands, cups, swords, and pentacles. I like really dark art and dark tarot decks. I feel so obnoxious sometimes. I like tarot decks that like engage deeply with shadow. I like approaches to collage that are a little different and provocative. Like, so the art and its novelty speaks to me. I actually like the way in which I'm provoked. And I am tickled by how much this unsettles some people. Like, I know it gives you the heebie-jeebies, which I love just a little bit because I'm like that. But I find the pips, or I found them very difficult to read. So, and it was really important to me at the point that I got this deck and first started working with it that I could feel fluent in a deck. And I thought the degree of work it would take to become familiar with this deck and fluent in the images meant that it just wasn't for me. So that's why. And this was, I mean, for years, I had this in my trade pile. It went out of print, and it is back in print, fortunately. Mine is edged. I etched this myself. But I have come to appreciate like the gift of like becoming fluent in it. But it's still at work. Like, this is not, the Four of Locks being the Four of Pentacles. Like, there's still work here. But the reason it's become a lover's deck is because I love the journey of working with it. It's still a journey though, but I chose this as my runner-up because I have found falling in love with this deck easier than falling in love with the deck that I chose because I wanted to love it so much. That's why I got it. And it's so fun and so weird and like so uncomfortable. So we will include the information, of course, in the video description, but it's so exciting that it is back in print because it's an odd one and an interesting one.
That one, just in the way that the Somnia Tarot pokes at some of my stuff in ways that just makes it distracting. One of the main ones being that entire suit being needles. Like, I am deathly afraid of needles, and there are reasons why. I just and so seeing a needle, I can't see a needle on a television screen. I can't be in the presence of somebody else getting a vaccination or having blood drawn. Like, it is
interesting. When I get my blood drawn or I have to get a shot, I'm always like watching closely. I'm fascinated by like the embodied like kind of creepiness of it. And
girl, you are like
Derek, my husband, is like in and out. Like, he doesn't want to talk about it. He wouldn't come with me to get tattoos because of the needles. But I'm like sitting there like watching. It's kind of fascinating. The human body relationship to needles are fascinating. But that hanged man that I showed, the suspension, so the image of the man being hung by hooks is so, and the owl, I don't know, that image is so like, it is powerful. It is really powerful. And if it's not for you, here's who I think that deck is not for. Somebody who is really triggered or turned off by those images altogether. It can be for you if it's enjoyable to like, you can figure out how to work with the Six of Locks if that's your hurdle. And that's what that's what I realized. Like, okay, I don't think it's supposed to be easy. Like, there's a suspended man with an owl on the hanged man. I don't think this is supposed to be like me and the Six of Pentacles are snappy. No, this is like insisting on a certain kind of work. But if looking at a suspension image head on is not something you can do, then it's just not for you.
All right. Okay. So what is your deck that you chose? Like, what is your pick?
Deck is out of print. It's a little thinner than normal, but this is the Lunatic Tarot.
Okay.
What is your deck?
I picked the Pagan Otherworlds.
Dun, dun,
I
dun.
know this is a well-loved deck, and for very good reason, and we'll get into why this was an enemies to lovers relationship, but yeah, my Pagan Otherworlds. So, okay, let's launch into the questions. Tell us the backstory of this deck. How did you come by this? How did you, like, where did you first see it? What drew you to it in the first place?
I will. So I was fascinated by decks that indulged images or explored images of madness. So it really was a superficial, like searching out decks that really were direct about saying like craziness, madness, the lunatic, whatever. That's what I'm up to in this deck. And I found it was out of print the time that I found it. It's been out of print for a very long time. I've had this for, I don't know, like 5 years or something. But it was pretty cheap because at that time used because I don't think people were really looking for it or thinking about it. It's a Hong Kong artist and niche in its moment, let alone now. Yeah. So that's how I came by it. I may need to, and we'll talk more about why this was difficult throughout our questions, but I will say that some of the images may not be safe for work. So I may be skipping some of those and that will come up as a part of our conversation. But what is how you came by this deck?
So I was I had the first edition of this deck, the first printing. I There were a couple reasons why I initially got it. Because I can't remember when it was initially published. 2016. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, there was a lot of hype around it. Everybody in and I was pretty at that point. I was pretty steeped in like tarot community stuff. Like I followed a few people on YouTube. I remember Kelly from The Truth and Story was really excited about this deck. I want to say Tom Benjamin was around and he was talking a lot about it. Patrick Fogarty, who no longer has a channel, his channel name changed several times, but Patrick Fogarty of the Wheel of the astrology deck. He has a really fantastic astrology deck. I don't have it because it's not my thing, but yeah, they were really excited about this deck. And Kelly especially.
Can we see some of the images while you talk?
Sorry. Kelly especially I really trusted her judgment. And so I was like, okay, if she's excited about it, then I can get behind it. And I can't remember if they initially had this on Kickstarter or if it was a pre-order situation, but I backed it in whatever way that you can back those types of things. And at that point, I really didn't have a big deck collection. Another thing worth noting at the time is that was around the time that I was starting kind of play with Tarot de Marseille. And all that I was hearing about this deck was that it was a pip deck. And I was like, cool. I'm here for that. And yeah, that's how I got it. And it's worth noting, I guess this was where this fits in. I traded this deck away. And then I repurchased it 3 or so years ago. I think it was about the time that we first met each other that I reordered this deck. So yeah. Okay, our next question is, what was the nature of your initial relationship with this deck? So was it like you flat out did not like it, so you were total enemies, or was it more of a frenemy situation? Did you kind of like love to hate it?
I would say it was kind of frenemies. It's kind of frenemies. Like the deck, you will see in the images, has some images that are that feel a little fetish. So like that you can see the illustrative style. This is very like a kind of anime style in some ways, in a lot of cards that the quartz are completely different. But like, here is the star. Okay. I I had trouble with the gaze. We can say like the gaze, like the part of what felt like a the male gaze or the representation of the female body, the lean into the fetish. These courts are amazing. Like look at that beautiful king of cups and this high priestess. Like it felt a little internally inconsistent, like, and not always clear why. Like that star card next to that high priestess don't feel like the same majors to me. Here's the chariot, which is, if you look at like look at the sphinxes, we're deep into, yep.
All right.
You know, yeah, yeah. So I had trouble. I'll finish here with the Fool, but we started out as frenemies because I didn't have a lot of expectations. I don't look for full flip throughs of things before I get them. So I didn't look for full flip throughs. I saw a few images and was like, sure, this is a reasonable used deck price. So why not give it a shot? So I wasn't clear on what I was getting in a way that excites me, but then I got what I was getting. I was like, I don't know if this was the right choice. I don't know if this is if we're meant to be. Because I don't like, I'm having trouble even discerning what to do with this Seven of Wands. And it was making me feel uncomfortable in an unproductive way. You know, like I'm saying that Hanged Man in Terror of Curiosities, uncomfortable productively. Some of this, like, look at this Fool. You know? So what uh can you understand why I got this? This is the first
But
card I
it
see.
feels so juxtaposed to some of the other cards that you see. It's like I think I'm having a hard time understanding the point of view of that deck just based off of the initial, like what you're showing. Like that, wow. You know, but like set up against something like the Star or the Fool or even that Chariot, I'm like, I don't understand the world in which all of these exist together, you know?
It makes you feel a little crazy. Little like a lunatic. This Eight of Pentacles. Look at this Eight of Pentacles. Is that not beautiful?
Yeah. It's so fascinating. Okay.
It is. And I will say this was initially, I've learned was initially a really large sized deck, like I think altar size card. And the creator, the artist initially printed it so that the back of the altar size cards was the Rider-Waite-Smith image. So he wanted you to know. I think that's important to know for some reason. I think that's interesting in its production journey. I don't know if people were like, oh my gosh, I love these cards. Can you make them so they're actually manageably sized? But it is an unusual production journey. It is very out of print. I think people did not respond to this in a way that was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to use this. So I don't know. I valued it, but it was ready to leave my house for years. It was in the trade pile. So how about you? Enemies or frenemies?
I think we were enemies. I was super disappointed. I remember getting this deck, being so excited about it. I even, with my initial copy, I didn't like break the seal because I remember people like freaking out about that. So I opened it annoyingly from the bottom. You can see with this copy, I broke through that seal. I did not care. I found that frustrating. And I just remember flipping through this deck for the first time and being like, oh. Um, and that is no hate to Usi, like really and truly, because what that evolved into was this feeling like I was too dumb to read with this deck because I couldn't figure it out. There are some cards that are essentially Rider-Waite-Smith without the people. And then there were some cards that, let me find a good example. Because there are a few that do something different altogether, if I can find a good example of one. So like here in the 7 of coins, we get something else entirely. And I'll have to say this, my original intent with wanting to get and work with this deck was from the point of view that it, in my mind, was a pip deck. And I wanted to kind of practice my work with pips, which at the time was pretty limited. I hadn't really started, like I hadn't read Ben Dove yet, and I hadn't started working with like a more open reading style. And I would see cards like this, the 5 of Swords, and not be able to get Rider-Waite-Smith out of my head. But I was trying really hard to read numerologically and like the numerology and the suit together. And I had a hard time finding that when it felt like there was such a strong influence of Rider-Waite-Smith.
Yeah.
And really being able to put that down. And so I kind of felt like this deck was mocking me. Like I felt like it was like it was, I don't know. It felt like there was something about my reading that wasn't strong enough, that wasn't well versed enough to be able to navigate between something that is a Rider-Waite-Smith without the people and something that is goes in a different direction. And for like, the 6 of Cups, little bit of Rider-Waite-Smith influence there, but also something else. And so it made me feel dumb, and I didn't like that.
That's
and so I traded it away pretty quickly. Yeah, it was,
I heard it was not a Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and I got it and was like, this is kind of a Rider-Waite-Smith deck without people. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I like the Rider-Waite-Smith system, and this is beautiful art, but I feel like you people are fibbing with me.
Well, and I think at the time they hadn't put out their like guidebook, and I still don't have that guidebook. But yeah, that was kind of like, that was the first pass with this deck, was I was like, I feel like you know something that I don't know, and you're not willing to divulge it. Like it was really frustrating, and I was disappointed, and I felt stupid, and so I traded it away. Okay. So next question is so in the world of the enemies to lovers trope, we often see something called like forced proximity. So our characters are forced to be together, where they learn to love each other. So what forced you to start working with this deck? Or like when did you finally pick it up and go, okay, this is the time?
It was this year. I think I was like going back through the decks that are in that bucket in my closet. If I can get off my butt and go trade these instead of being lazy, I'm going to get rid of them. And I went through and saw this. It is literally rare and really unusual, and it's not a bad deck, but I was like, one more try. Like, let's give this one more try and make sure if I'm going to get rid of it that I really want to get rid of it, because I'm not going to be able to find it again. This is not a repurchase situation. So I gave it one more try after having put it away for really years, and it just worked differently. Like I insisted on, I was pulling one card a day. There are different ways to have a card a day practice. I approached this card a day practice like, this is an image. This is a choice for the 7 of Cups. That's a choice. But I was like, what image should I really engage with today? Like, what card do I need to get to know? And in that way, with like the pressure off, I too had felt kind of like, are you making fun of me? Like, we have an aversive relationship, kind of, right? Like, these figures have an attitude. Like, they're
all looking directly, maybe not all of them, but it feels like a lot of them are looking directly at the viewer too.
They are. Isn't this look like the Babadook?
A little bit.
But like these, I don't even quite know how to put it. These are not friendly figures, and they're not figures that like feel, this is a little fetishy, that feel immediately familiar to me. So I really was prepared to work with it, do my month with it, and say like, I don't know. I don't think that like, this, why not free this up for somebody who um would have
And
more.
so what was it that like changed your mind? Was it more of like a slow burn, or was it like you had one really great reading, or what shifted that for you?
I think I just journaled with one image at a time. And that really helped, forcing myself to truly sit and see and ask, like, because I think before I was like, okay, you artist, you're really good at being provocative and doing your kind of like fetishy, uncomfortable, whatever. But if I really sit with that 7 of Cups and it's just me in that image and I'm journaling, like really interesting stuff comes up. I realized like, oh, if I set aside, like, I haven't gotten really into a flow of bigger readings. Like, I haven't laid out 5 or 6 cards on a table with this deck. I've done 3 cards max because this is still a journey of learning to love this deck and feeling loved by it. But so much of that journey has been actual proximity with the images. So getting to know, and that has really been like, do you have something to teach me? And I think it does. I've learned about the this 10 of Wands. Like, I've learned something about the 10 of Wands using this image, which is really spare and really uncomfortable, but there is something here that's special and unique. Yeah.
That's so interesting. You say to feel loved by it too. Do you often like, do you feel like you're loved by your decks?
Oh no, I mean loved, but I think I mean tolerated. It like sometimes, here's what I actually mean. Sometimes I feel like they just don't want to talk to me, and that's okay. When a deck is like, we're not on the same register, we're not like having the same conversation, then you're just like, I have enough decks. Like, I have enough decks that we are like in a flow, even if you want to yell at me. A deck that I talk about in a video that I'm putting out later this week is Barbara Walker. She'll talk to me. She doesn't have anything nice to say. She loves to talk to me. This deck, I finally feel like it's talking to me. Like, it cares enough to talk to me. Nothing is easy that it has to say, though. This is not a comfort deck. God help me if I'm feeling tender, this is not the place to come.
Interesting. Okay.
All right, how about you?
I had to rebuy this deck. And kind of the thing that inspired me to rebuy this was we have a mutual friend who talked about her love for this deck. And I was like, maybe I didn't give it enough of a chance like the first time around. And I ended up, I think I saw it on like Instagram or a Facebook group or something like that. And it gave me an opportunity to really take a second look at it. And I was like, you know what? There's, at the very least, like, there's no denying, at least in my opinion, that these images are really, really beautiful.
Yeah.
And I appreciated the world that they created with this deck. Like, there is something so seamless about the way all of the cards kind of fit together and communicate to each other. And so I had a moment and I was like, you know what? Maybe I know a little bit more now. I have been reading quite a bit longer at this point, because this was like what, in 2022, 2021, something like that. Maybe it'll be different this time. So I bought it, looked through it, like you do when you get a deck.
Mm-hmm.
Was like, oh, these are really pretty, and then like put it away and never really thought about it for a long time after that, like you do. And I think one day I just got like a wild hair. It was like, what do I want to pull out today? And it was kind of like, I don't know. I kind of felt like I fell into the deep end with this deck, just pulling it out and doing one reading with it. Like I felt like a curtain had been pulled back a little bit in a way that I was like, oh, I think I get it now. Or at least I get how I can work with this deck and how I can make sense of these cards. There was something so, and I think what it was that had like inspired me to pull this out in the first place is I was like you do. I was like overwhelmed. I was really busy in my life at the time, and I was feeling just kind of like overstimulated. Everything felt like it was around me, felt like it was at like a 10. And I needed something in tarot that felt a little bit quieter and
Mm.
more spacious. And I think that was my way in, was the spaciousness of this deck. And it was actually the spaciousness of it that made me fall in love with it. Like, here's an example. So if I put, 3 cards next to each other, I think when I initially saw this deck, all of that empty space around those pips and the landscaping and like all of there was scenery, but it was kind of sparse. It felt really intimidating. It felt like I had to fill up so much space. Like the cards weren't really telling enough of a story on their own that I could, and I didn't feel up to the task to fill in all of that space, all of those blank spaces. But that was what made me fall in love with it the second time around, is it was like, oh my God, there's so much room to breathe here. And I can let my mind play, and I can, there in other areas of my life, I wasn't really able to take up that much space because the needs of others and like the demands of my job at the time, all of that stuff like required that I shrink myself smaller and smaller. And just like these like sparse kind of grayish backgrounds and the sky of each card, I was like, oh, this is where I can take up more space. And this is where I can say more, where I can be more, where I can stretch and play and like I can kind of pour my feelings into those spaces in between. And it was kind of an immediate like, oh, I get it now, and we are in love. It didn't take time. I think it was just, I needed to be in that moment where there were things inside me that needed to get out.
Yeah.
And this deck provided a platform for that. Which is interesting. The very thing that like initially intimidated me about this deck was what drew me in the second time around.
Does any part of you feel like, is this a thing that just your taste changed and your openness to it changed, or is it about your maturity as a reader? Because in some ways I feel like my new openness to this deck is about my maturity as a reader.
I think it's definitely about my maturity as a reader. Like I think I'm a little bit more open to, have over the years grown to be a lot more open about like what tarot can do and the spaces that it can occupy.
Yeah.
And so and I will say, like, the way I work with this deck, and I know we'll get into this a little bit later, and the way that I work with tarot generally now is so different from back when I first got this and was trying to work with it. I've worked with pips a lot more since then, and so I have a much more nuanced understanding of how to work with pips, which then like bled over into a very nuanced understanding of how to work with like all cards generally. But so I was able to like bring a lot of that flavor with me to revisiting this deck. Yeah.
All right. I
Answer
think
your
we
question.
answered 2 questions.
Yes.
So,
So our
yeah.
next question is kind of a two-parter. Are there any like mutual enemies that you share? Like or allies? Like are there any shared traits or ideologies that you have? Any points of view that you share with this deck? And the second part is the idea of mirroring. So is there some way that this that maybe the things that initially you disliked or rejected about this deck were really reflecting kind of part of yourself back to you?
Those are tied into each other.
Yeah.
Um, so I realized, I think, that part of what was uncomfortable to me about this deck is its engagement with erotic imagery and power, like sometimes at the same time, sometimes separately, and deception and deceptiveness, because there's sneakiness and um yeah, that was clearly tapping into something that was like work I needed to do. I became increasingly clear to me with one card at a time, and a really honest accounting of like, what don't I like about this? What is this resistance really about? Because I actually think that's important. Sometimes, everyone, believe us, we know that sometimes you just don't like a deck and it's not that deep. Like sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. It's just not a deck for you, right? So this isn't like a mature reader can work with anything. But I wanted to know, it was unclear to me, was that it? Was it just taste? And I didn't think it was. This was making me uneasy in a deeper way than that. So one card at a time, I'm realizing like if you had asked me, is there work that you need to do around like um power and gendered power and control, I would have been like, yup. Yes, ma'am. Yes, there is. But I hadn't identified that that's what was happening in these images. Like, and that's what it was coming up for me. Um, like this 3 of Pentacles, there's a relationship happening between these 3 figures that is really something. And with one card in front of me, with just this card, that was brought into relief. Um, yeah. So those my clarity around needing to work on those issues and my genuine belief like that tarot can help support that exploration became compatible with like, oh, that's what's happening here and that's what's possible with these images, you know?
Yeah. Do you find that it seems to me like the dynamic that you had with this deck initially was like, oh, here's this deck over here and then here's me, like we are opposites. Do you find that there are any ways that you might actually be a little bit more alike than you initially thought?
Yes. I think I got this deck. I have not had in general taste for anime art. Um and I didn't think that I had anything in common with these images. Is that weird to say? Like, I mean, they're images in a tarot card. So, like, what do we have in common?
Style, like you could say it's just not my style.
Well, or I don't look anything like her. She is
Sure.
younger than me. She is differently colored and shaped than me. We are different people. But, like, I didn't think that the dynamics explored had anything to do with me. This is like a little cyberpunk, it was just, I didn't see it. But the stuff that means that like there's work to do around the body and erotic impulse and power and all of that means that like uh there's something happening on here. Like this world card is so beautiful. um yeah, that we have something in common. The quartz are just something. I don't know. who knows the inner life of an artist? So I could give you like some rich account of what this artist was really trying to do. What I do know that he did is collect a bunch of images and art that make me feel very uneasy in their inconsistency and dissonance. They feel very dissonant. That fetishy chariot next to that queen of swords doesn't feel like the same deck. It doesn't feel like they would like each other. It doesn't feel like the same world in some ways. And I think that part of doing this work is coming to terms with the fact that like what if they are? And what if both of those are my world and like they're talking about stuff that I need to be talking about? So it is an uneasy relationship with what I see in the mirror. You know, people talk about doing mirror. I am not that person that's like sitting and doing affirmations in front of a mirror. It makes me cringe. Like I'm not that person. But my uneasy relationship with the mirror, I think is my relationship with this deck. I do see my stuff in its images. It is not realism. So I think in some ways it is like animated parts of the self. And I don't know. I don't know.
Well, and it makes me think about these conversations that you and I have had about, so you're a Libra sun, I am a Libra moon, and there's part of that like Libra nature to want to create harmony in different scenarios, especially like when we're dealing with like different types of people. So we walk into situations, we read them, and we go, okay, what part of myself fits into this so that it creates a sense of balance and harmony? And over time, we've learned to kind of compartmentalize different parts of ourselves. And it feels almost like these different aspects of ourself don't fit together in the same world. Like they all have their different worlds, they have their different friends that they hang out with. And there's something about the like disconnected feeling of that deck where it does feel like there are different worlds existing together that I can imagine. Like it makes my Libra moon go, these things don't belong together. Those are your like going out friends cards, and these are your like daytime friend cards. I don't understand how they exist in the same space. And so that's kind of fascinating.
Yeah. And you and I have both talked separately about our interesting and varied thoughts on like the erotic in tarot art, about how it works, what we like about it, what we don't like about it, whatever. Are sometimes immature reflections on like the engagement of the erotic in tarot art, but all of the stuff like that is a category of tarot art that is itself complicated and interesting and whatever. It's this deck's kind of casual engagement with that style in the midst of a bunch of other stuff is really unsettling. And that's like, that is triggering because as like a woman who has been through an embodied experience as a woman, as we do, we tend to like come with stuff, to have accumulated like experience and beauty and trauma and all of it. Like it's kind of getting at all of those. Its insistence on incoherence is really I'm an incoherent I mean, what did I think a lunatic tarot was? What did I think it was?
Frankly, when you, because I haven't seen that deck, and when you started showing cards, I was like, this is not what I expected something called the Lunatic Tarot to be.
Part of me is like, look, that is a that's good marketing. That's like a provocative name. So, and I think at the time that I got this and I felt a really aversive relationship to it, I'm like, that's all it is. This is like provocative art and enticing marketing with a, you know, an interesting name, and that's it. No, I actually think there is really depth here. I don't have to know how intentional or not some of these choices were for marketing, but I do think they do stuff. Like I think I said in a video some time ago, like I'm interested in what art and stories and whatever. Like Danielle, the professor, would always stand up in front of class and say, let's think about how it works. like how this piece of fiction works. This art does work. And I was ready to write it off because I didn't like the work it was doing. I mean, like, it's not doing any work. It's doing like, ooh, buy me because I'm like, I'm enticing and whatever. No, this works. It's uncomfortable work. And it's lunatic tarot. Like, it's not gonna be easy. I don't know what I think I thought it would be. I don't know what I thought it would be. Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, fascinated. Don't say that. I'm fascinated.
How about you? Mutual enemies, allies, mirror, all this stuff.
Okay. I think in some ways, kind of touching on what I was talking about with the spaciousness of this deck, like, I think this deck found me at a time when the idea of taking up space with my own ideas, intellect, knowledge, or even just myself was like, whoa. that in itself was intimidating. I've been a teacher my entire adult life. This is because I had this deck even before I was like a parent, and I don't tend to take up space in a lot of situations. There are very few in which I allow myself to take up space. And I think this deck said, hey, no, you have to. In order for this to work, you have to fill in some of these gaps with some of your own stuff. And I was like, no, thanks. And so I think it really pointed some of that out to me.
I really like that. What an interesting analysis of like your relationship to the art and its openness.
Yeah, and I think, there was something also about how, like, because it's beautiful art. These are oil paintings. They are done in a traditional style. And there was something that there's something that can feel so detached about that. And so it really asks the reader to do a lot of that work, a lot of that like connection work. And that is work that I feel really uncomfortable doing in a human sense, like with people. I'm like, if I can stand quietly in a corner, I will. Like, thanks. And so like, I would not describe this as a chatty deck. And this deck needs the reader to be chatty. And I think in those ways, we're really like, I can be chatty when you and I get off camera, and try to have meetings together. We end up going on and on and on. But there are really rare spaces in which I can like let that out. Yeah. And I think I tend more often than not, especially in mixed company, to not be the chatty one because I'm a little worried of like putting my foot in my mouth and saying something dumb. And this deck is like, nah, you go first. Like, this deck is like, I'm not gonna do that for you. So you have to be the one. And so yeah, I think like you said, it needed to be a little bit more mature. To be able to really work with it in a meaningful way.
You are giving me insight into my own, because this art is in many places wide open. There's a lot of white space. And I'm wondering if any of what your reflections are in your relationship to that deck. Like, I don't like that it's bringing up a really uncomfortable topic and then saying, you go. Like, I'm like, I don't want to go. I don't want to do it.
Yeah, you start. You go first. Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, I think. Yeah, those decks that I think that's generally like Pip-ish decks are intimidating in that way. They ask you to do a lot of the work. But there was something about this one in particular that just, I don't know, it feels so open, but it also feels like that openness leaves a large margin for error. And I don't know. And that's scary, right? Whether it be in our regular, people interacting lives or in our work with tarot. There was something about this deck that actually ended up reflecting back to me a lot of my like relationships, mostly in the sense of like how I relate to other people and how I exist in spaces around other people. And I'm just making that connection now talking through this with you. Which is so fascinating because it's not a peopled deck. Like there are people, like here's, the King of Swords, but then you get like every pip is not peopled, but there is something about it that, at least for me and the work that I can do with it and that I've been able to do with it, it calls attention to how I'm existing in spaces where there are people.
I mean, the objects in cups, swords, and pentacles are all very ornamental products of people.
Mhm.
But then in these like beautiful open spaces, that is such a work of art. That deck has mostly for me been, I think it's an important part of tarot history. If you're a collector and you care about tarot history and you have the room in your home, I haven't used it so much, but it's so beautiful.
It is. It is really, really beautiful. And here's the thing, it would be so easy and not at all wrong. I mean, there's no wrong way to read a deck, but like it would be so easy to just take this deck and go, all right, what is the Seven of Pentacles in the Rider-Waite-Smith? What's the associated meaning with that?
Yeah.
But like, I don't know, there was something that felt, I mean, even just looking at the Seven of Pentacles, there was something that felt like that's not how I want to work with that.
Yeah.
And it just, it really took like, we had to break up. To break up and walk away from each other and then come back together. When I was in a different place, we were, it was not the right time. Do you have those old human lovers that you're like, if I met them now, what a different relationship we could have had?
Well, tell me if this is true for that deck. And it's kind of true for my thoughts in relationship to that deck. I had such a deep resistance in some ways to the Rider-Waite-Smith supremacy. I felt like a lot of the decks that I had and were seeing and spent time with were like, that is tarot. And I was like, no, it's not. And you can't make me. That when that deck came into my life at first, and it was so clearly Rider-Waite-Smith inflected. I think it's really clear that like those are the gestures that are happening in a lot of places. And that if you are an RWS reader, that's completely legible to you.
Yeah.
And I was so like, you can't make me. And why is it so surface? That it took calming down. I just need someone time. Was like, calm down. Like, it's there. It can be inflected. It can be reflected there. And you can do other stuff. Like, do you feel like your calmed hostility or like your pushback to a kind of Rider-Waite-Smith prevailing supremacy and the kind of way that that's like cooled and you've fallen into your rhythm as a reader has opened up that, do you know what I mean?
Yes, because I think I did. I initially I wanted to do other things that weren't Rider-Waite-Smith with it, and I didn't think it was possible. And I felt like it was because of me. Like I was the error, like of why that wasn't possible. And here's the thing. I was not at a point where I could figure it out. But that's not some like moral failing. It's just, it's just I wasn't ready for it yet. Okay. Any final thoughts? Anything you want to say about like your relationship now, how you work together?
This was a daily pull from about the middle of August to the end of September. So it's been that recent that we've come to an accord. And I've like grown, I have a real affection for this. I say love, like sometimes love is like we're off every day having a dance. Like, no, I still approach this deck with some trepidation. But it's stayed on my desk since then. Like ever since the middle of August, this has stayed because it's not a daily pull and it's not even necessarily a weekly pull, but I want it handy because I think we have stuff to talk about. And like not always stuff I want to talk about. I would never, so that's its place in my practice right now. It is always out, and I'm always open to seeing, like, ooh, this can probably reveal what discomfort I'm feeling. And it's forcing my stretching as a reader. Like these decks, I imagine for you, this is certainly true for me. Both of these decks are, as mature as I am and as good a reader as I am, forcing me to stretch those muscles because it's art. Art is always going to make us stretch our muscles. There's no like being so mature that we're just over it. In my mind, if it's a dynamic, inventive tarot deck, it's always going to, there's always a new kind of approach to art that's going to make us stretch. So this is a part of that learning and growing process at the moment. I think I know it well enough that if I wanted to read with this for other people, I could. I would never do it. Ever, ever, ever. This is too, I am not the person. I know some people are like, if there is a dark message in the cards, like I try to soften it and make it like, no, if there's a dark message in the cards, it's not my message, it's your message. I am like the channel to share something. The stuff that comes up in this is too connected to like vulnerability, the body, power, loss of power, like sexual kind of difficult, like all of this stuff that is, unless a person is like, I need to do some like real shadow work around these themes, that's just too much. Certainly not a person I've only read for once. If I brought this to market, I feel like someone would escort me off the premises.
Yeah. No. I feel like that's not the deck to bring out when you're like, how can I get a promotion at work? Sort of stuff. Like that's not. All right, so it's ongoing. You're like in the midst.
But it's a love relationship because I am really like, this is great. I have no other deck that's making me do this work that I think is important work. And that's really cool. And I simply do feel like I do not take it lightly that this is not a deck that's easy to find. Like I think it's a privilege to work with something that is difficult to find and does something really unique. So I appreciate the opportunity to work with a very unique approach to tarot that is really teaching me something that I don't have any other deck to do that. So how about you? What's your relationship to your deck?
I mean, kind of like final thoughts. This is, through that work, has become a deck that I go to when I need to like take a deep breath in and like an exhale. You know, it feels, it's so quiet. And it's like when my thoughts are kind of racing, or even not even when my thoughts are racing, when it's like life around me is racing and my thoughts kind of feel like so tangled up in that, and it's hard to kind of differentiate my thoughts and myself from life out, like the world outside of me. This is a great space to kind of just go and be still and quiet, and it really lets me take my time, as much time as I need to. You know, there are some decks that are like fast, and this deck is not quite that. I think there's something so fascinating about the nature, like the slow nature of the creation of this deck. Like oil painting is not, I tried oil paint as I went from watercolor to oil painting, and I was like, oh, takes forever for each layer to dry. And I was going alla prima too. So I was painting wet and wet. Traditional, some oil painters will go like thin layer by layer, and I was like, I do not have the patience for that. We are sitting down and we're going to wet and wet this, and I still just did not have the patience. One day I will have the patience for oil painting, and when that day comes, I have everything. I have all the materials for it. But yeah, I wonder if there's something about the slow nature of the medium that this was created in that it lets you just kind of like really slow down with it. And so while this isn't like a daily deck for me, this isn't a deck that I go to for everything. I would totally take this to a market. Like I think this would be really lovely at any market. There's something about this deck that feels so tarot. you know.
It feels
But
solemn, very serious.
it does feel solemn and serious. But I think it can read for anything. It but yeah, I don't necessarily go to it all the time, but I go to it for a need, and it absolutely fits that need. Yeah, just when I need a little bit of breathing room so I can gather my thoughts and work through them as slowly as I need to, and then I can kind of go back to the world.
Can I say, Usi is the publishers of that deck and the creators of that deck create pieces of fine art, but they are not the fine art deck house that is about scarcity or like they want their art to be worked with. I just love that about them. There are some houses and publishers of tarot that are also creating really fine art and in some ways are like limited availability, not the most resilient card stock because it's not necessarily meant for that daily reading. I feel like the people who created that deck that you're showing and using would be like, beat this guy up every day. I want the oil painting that took me a decade to be like to do all the stuff you want it to do. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a deck that I've seen some people's copies that are like battered and beaten and I love and this cardstock can handle it. This is like the gold standard for tarot cardstock. My only complaint, like kind of weird annoying stuff, is I have not huge hands and I can't quite fit my hands around. So I have to shuffle the corners.
It's nice and linen, but it's big and can get a little slippery. So I have embarrassed myself with that deck before. But I do think there's something about a personality. You can tell something about a tarot reader on the basis of the way they open that box. When I found out no one was breaking the seal, I was like, we're tearing it from the top. Like everyone's gonna know I opened my deck. I will not do this. I don't even know why. That's a fine way to open a deck, but it felt like an act of I was showing.
I've considered, as gorgeous as the lettering is for the title, I've considered trimming the edges off. I don't know, we might one day. Just so I just want to shuffle it.
If that's what makes it more manageable, isn't it Natalia? What is her channel? Tarot.
Tarot Shrink. It used to be Ouroboros.
That's right. Tarot Shrink trimmed her Thoth greenie. And I know a bunch of people were like, how could you? It's her deck. That is your deck. And I think there's even more magic when some way we find ourselves in any way we choose modifying a deck. Like your handprint is on that. Sometimes all we have is like our hooligan shuffling, and that is enough of the handprint. But I think it'd be cool to see what that deck looks like trimmed. All right, my friends, we are going to wrap up with a question, as we like to do on this channel. We'll each pull one card. We're using our deck of choice, and that question for everyone is: what resistance should we challenge this week in our tarot work? These were enemies before they were lovers because in some ways we felt resistance to what we found in these decks. So what resistance should we challenge this week in our tarot work to perhaps turn another something from enemies to lovers? All right. Just say this deck is old, but the cardstock stands up. I don't love it, but it's such a beautiful. Okay.
It is gorgeous. Like there is no denying that this is a beautiful deck. So what do we have? The Six of Cups.
The Six of Cups. Isn't that sweet? There's something, I have to say the perspective, like the use of perspective in the art is really dynamic and interesting. All right. The Wheel of Fortune and the Six of Cups. This depiction in the Six of Cups, the adult figure giving like kind of a sippy cup to the younger figure off on the border. I feel a little seen because we were talking about, at least for me, how part of my resistance is it was like, I'm not going to spoon feed you anything. Good luck. We're not making it easy. I'm not holding out something for you to drink down what's here. So this feels like it's pointing to that theme. What does the Wheel of Fortune have to say about that?
I think the Wheel of Fortune, there's something about like the passage of time here that I'm seeing between these two cards, especially between like the colors in your card feel so autumnal.
Yes.
And this feels almost wintry in the pagan otherworlds. And I feel like there's something about like pigeonholing our work to seasons, that like that the conditions have to be just right in a particular season for us to be able to do a certain kind of work, whether that be working with a certain kind of deck, or if you do deity work, working with a specific type of deity, and like kind of tying it into that idea of like being spoon fed, and needing to, like, the deck asking you to do the work instead of it kind of doing most of the work for you. I think sometimes that, like, when we kind of pocket things into seasons in that way, and it doesn't have to be like calendar season. It could be like, I'm only going to work in this way when such and such is going on in my life or whatever. Sometimes those ruts, those like grooves and patterns that we form for ourselves make it so that like we're kind of like autopiloting our way through.
Mhm.
And that's what's doing the work for us. But maybe shifting outside of that a little bit, doing something out of season, doing something at a different time than when you normally would, or in a different circumstance than you normally would. And it could be something as simple as like maybe your daily pull is in the morning, switch it to the night, see what happens, sort of thing. Gives us new opportunity to stretch and grow and do a little bit more work than maybe we're accustomed to. It's not even, yeah.
This also feels, it's pointing to that resistance, but it also feels like the encouragement based on what you're talking about with the wheel is like just a little taste. Like if like step out of this mess on this side of the card and just like you're saying, ask the question you normally do for your daily pull, but do it at a different time of day. Maybe sit in a different space, like, and stretch. Like, I like that. I like that. Um, yeah. Any final words, or are you going to take us home?
No, I think that's it. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Let us know. Do you have any decks that were an enemies to lovers situation? I think we might end up hashtagging this so that if you want to, like, I'll put the questions down below. So if you want to nab them and do your own video response to this, we'd love to see it. If not, just leave a comment and let us know the decks that have over time become well beloved for you, if perhaps you had a little bit of a troubled relationship at first. I'll also include information about the decks we showed, as well as where you can find us on social media and where you can book a reading or a mentorship through our website. But until next time, friends, we'll see you in the lab.
Bye.